Welcome to the Breaking the Cycle 2021 conference, where we have come together to share evidence-based methodologies and interventions in working with hardest to reach vulnerable children and families. Today is day 2 of our 2-day conference, and this is the first webinar of the day. My name is Sherman Moladina, and I work with Railway Children Africa as Programs, Training, and Practice Development Advisor. Just some housekeeping first for Zoom. Your video and sound are turned off, but you're able to communicate and comment and ask questions through the 2 functions. So we request, please, that if you can put your comments in the chat box and questions in the Q&A box. Both of those you'll be able to find on the bottom bar of Zoom if you hover on that. We have interpretation from English to Kiswahili for this webinar, if you would prefer to listen in Kiswahili. So again, if you go to the bottom bar, you will see a globe and for translation, and then you can pick the Kiswahili channel so that you can hear all of the presentations in Kiswahili. We have 2 speakers with us today for this very exciting webinar. Unfortunately, our moderator is having technical difficulties joining, but she's working on trying to connect. So I'm going to quickly just step in, and hopefully, if she's able to connect, then she'll be able to join us and take over. Our moderator is actually a very experienced person in this field. Her name is Joanna Wakia, and she's a senior associate with Maestro International. But I can introduce her further when and if she's able to join us, hopefully. So the webinar that we're here for today is an extremely important webinar with regard to the overall theme of the conference. As you all know, the conference theme is breaking the cycle. And when we're talking about breaking the cycle, we're actually talking about breaking the intergenerational cycle of violence. And this particular webinar today is interventions, evidence-based interventions, in fact, to address gender-based violence and violence against children. And so you can see that it's quite a key webinar that links to this theme. So if I can just introduce our speakers for today. First, we have Gabriela Pinto. She is from Raising Voices in Uganda. And she will be presenting on the SASA model, which is a community mobilization approach to prevent violence against women and HIV. The model engages a critical mass of people across all levels of society in order to create change in social norms. Gabriela is an accomplished professional, currently working as technical advisor on violence against women prevention with Raising Voices, based in Kampala. She's previously held technical advisory roles with Plan International and the World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts, with a focus on girls' empowerment programs, as well as violence prevention programs that engage children and young people. Then, after Gabriela, we will have Nancy Akoth. Nancy Akoth is the program manager at Ujamaa Africa, where she coordinates the implementation of the Ujamaa's school-based program, providing a comprehensive rape prevention strategy for both girls and boys, which is being implemented in Kenya, Malawi, and Somalia. She has been part of previously the Yes, I Do Alliance Project implementation and technical team, and is a master trainer for the Gender Transformative Approach by Rutgers, Netherlands. So I am delighted to welcome both of our speakers, but to start with, I would like to welcome Gabriela to take us through her presentation. Karibuni, welcome.
Thank you, Sherman. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, and very warm greetings to everyone from Kampala. So thanks again, Sherman, for the introduction, and many thanks to Railway Children for the invitation and the opportunity to participate in this conference today. It's my absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. So as Sherman said, I'm here today on behalf of Raising Voices. a Ugandan NGO dedicated to the prevention of violence against women and children, and who are the creators of the SASA approach, which many of you might already be familiar with, an evidence-based model to prevent violence against women. So today I'll start with an introduction to the model, what it is, how it works, and briefly share some of our evidence around SASA's impacts on violence against women. And then, given the theme of this conference and the interests of this audience, I'll then look at the relationships and intersections between violence against women and violence against children, and share some of our evidence and learning around how SASA can potentially impact the lives and experiences of children as well. So starting off with just an introduction to what is SASA. So SASA is a community mobilization approach to prevent violence against women. It was first developed and piloted here in Uganda, but is now being implemented in over 40 countries around the world. And as Raising Voices, we provide technical support and guidance to partner organizations of all shapes and sizes, ranging from grassroots women's rights organizations to large INGOs and UN agencies who wish to use this approach to complement their work. The word SASA means now in Kiswahili, which was chosen to emphasize the urgency of the need for all of us to take action to prevent violence against women. SASA is also an acronym for the 4 phases of the SASA model: start, awareness, support, and action. And through this carefully phased approach, SASA aims to shift the social norms around that underpin and drive violence against women, and to promote healthier relationships between partners based on more balanced and equitable power dynamics. SASA was first published in 2008, and over the years has evolved into subsequent iterations. So we developed SASA Faith for working specifically with faith leaders and faith communities, and our most recent adaptation, SASA Together, was released just last year, which is a revision of the original SASA, really strengthened and improved based on our many years of practice-based learning. But I think all of the methodologies in the SASA family, as it were, SASA, SASA Faith, and SASA Together, all share the same kind of core DNA, the same essential elements that make SASA what it is, that make it effective, and perhaps distinguish it from some other approaches. So I'll quickly take you through those essential elements or key ingredients of SASA. Firstly, starting with the idea of benefits-based activism. So this idea of activism is really core to the SASA methodology, which relies on identifying and supporting people who have the passion and skills to be activists and to drive change within their own communities, and equipping and supporting them to engage their peers around the benefits of healthier nonviolent relationships. So not going into communities and saying, violence is wrong, you must stop doing that, but supporting people to envision a more positive, healthier alternative way of relating to one another, and the benefits that would bring for women, for children, for families, for whole communities. The second essential element of SASA is around kind of a gender and power analysis, so staying grounded in feminist principles, feminist analysis, identifying gendered power imbalances as the root cause of violence against women, and then using that language of power throughout SASA. So each phase of the SASA approach looks at a different form of power. In the start phase, we focus on identifying, connecting to, and nurturing the power within. In the awareness phase, we look at fostering critical reflection around men's power over women and the community silence around that. In the support phase, we look at joining power with others to support survivors and create a more enabling environment. And in the action phase, we look at power to create and sustain change in the longer term. And over the course of these 4 phases, we also aim to support communities on a carefully structured journey of change, moving from kind of a pre-contemplation stage where they might not yet be recognizing violence against women as a problem, through contemplating that, preparing to take action, taking action, and then eventually sustaining that change in the longer term. And then the last element is around holistic community engagement. So the SASA approach is really grounded in the socio-ecological model, so recognizing the multiple influences across a society that impact a woman's vulnerability to violence, and the importance of engaging at all of those different layers of society, from the individual and interpersonal to community and institutional in order to foster transformative change. So just expanding briefly on that last element around holistic community engagement, SASA really does aim for a holistic and multi-layered approach. So it involves identifying and recruiting everyday activists from each of those circles of influence. So community activists who will engage their friends and neighbors at an individual and interpersonal level, community leaders who can use their platforms to reach out at a community level, and allies within institutions who can promote change within services. These activists are trained and consistently supported, mentored throughout the SASA journey, and equipped with participatory and interactive and hopefully fun activities that they can incorporate into their day-to-day interactions and roles. So often meeting people where they are, in the market, after church, for casual conversations, using those existing interactions in their day-to-day lives to spread positive messages, and slowly over time to mobilize a critical mass that's necessary to really affect change in social norms. Just to give a very brief flavor of SASA, here's an example of one of our activities, the power poster, where each image shows some common situations and scenarios, and there are accompanying discussion questions for each image to help unpack how people are using their power in this situation, whether they're using it positively or negatively, and to encourage discussion and reflection on the benefits of healthier relationships. So that's just to give you a snapshot, a quick overview of what SASA is, its essential elements, how it works, and how it feels. So what evidence do we have on the impact of SASA on intimate partner violence? So we conducted a randomized controlled trial from 2007 to 2012 in partnership with the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine and Makerere University here in Uganda. And at the time, I think it was the first rigorous evaluation in Africa to really show impacts on violence at community level. So the study showed really significant impacts on the incidence of violence, which was found to be 52% lower in treatment communities compared to control communities, as well as on the social acceptability of violence amongst both men and women. The study found additional impacts on relationship dynamics. So women in intervention communities were significantly more likely to report being able to refuse sex with their partners, or to report joint decision-making and more open communication with their partners. So the study revealed kind of really positive findings, which at the time were quite exciting for us and groundbreaking, showing that violence is preventable and on a different kind of time scale than we might have thought in the case of 3 or 4 years rather than generations. So it was a really exciting study and moment for us as Raising Voices. So SASA was designed to combat violence against women. But we know that violence against women and violence against children are deeply linked and interrelated in crucial ways, as the subject of this conference and today's webinar illustrate. So, I mean, firstly, we know that they share many of the same risk factors and normative drivers. Most importantly, those very rigid gender norms around what is acceptable and expected for a boy or a girl, for a man or a woman, and the acceptability of the use of violence to police and enforce those norms if they are perceived to not be adhered to. We also know that violence against women and violence against children frequently co-occur, right? So for example, a father who is violent toward both his wife and his children, or children who may experience violence as a result of trying to intervene in a violent situation. And we also know, as Sherman mentioned in her introduction, that experience or exposure to violence in childhood has devastating long-term intergenerational effects. So boys who are exposed to violence in childhood are much more likely to perpetrate this in adulthood, and similarly girls who are exposed to violence in childhood are more likely to experience that as a survivor in adulthood. So preventing the experience or exposure to violence in childhood is so critical to preventing that experience later on in adulthood, and the ways that these two forms are deeply linked together. So I've shared with you some of our evidence on SASA's effects on violence against women, but what do we really know about the effects of SASA on children? It's important for me to kind of clearly acknowledge that the study was not designed to focus on children's experience of violence. That isn't something that the study I mentioned explicitly sought to evaluate. But we do have some findings that emerged as part of some secondary analysis and qualitative data. And here I'm really indebted to the work of Dr. Nambusi Kiagombe and the whole team at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine for their analysis that I'll share with you. So what did we find? From our quantitative data, we could estimate that the reductions in the incidence of IPV due to SASA, combined with reduced witnessing of SASA of violence when IPV did occur, overall led to a 64% reduction in the prevalence of children witnessing IPV in their home. And as we've looked at, that obviously has really important and effects in terms of their long-term development. We also have some really interesting and rich information from the qualitative data, which was gathered specifically from couples that did experience reduction in violence in the past 12 months. So the qualitative findings spoke to improvements in the quality of parent-child relationships and communication. As I've said, SASA is kind of all about the language of power and balancing power in intimate relationships. And we saw that some of those ideas started to infuse and inform the relationships between parents and their children, and not just between intimate partners. The qualitative findings also suggested that we were seeing a reduction in the use of corporal punishment, with some parents ceasing to use that altogether, and others at least not using it as a first response. And also qualitative findings suggesting a reduction in proxy violence, where the child is experiencing violence but might not necessarily be the intended target of that aggression. So, I mean, despite the fact that the study was not intentionally seeking to assess the impact of SASA on violence against children, I think we still have some promising findings here emerging from some of the quantitative and particularly the qualitative data, that the messages of SASA also improved children's experiences as well. So just to share a couple of quick quotes from the qualitative findings. I won't read all of these out. I'll let you read these for yourselves. But I think some of these quotes help to illustrate the key themes that were emerging for us from the qualitative data, what we were seeing around more open communication, around moving away from hierarchical and authoritative relationships based on dominance and power over, and moving toward more open and amicable relationships within families between parents and children. And kind of increased recognition within families that violence itself is harmful, whether that's directed at a woman or at children. So some interesting and I think hopeful indications here from the qualitative data. So then I'm conscious of time, so just to maybe wrap up quickly on some areas for future exploration and learning. So I mean, despite the deep links and interrelationships that we've talked about between violence against women and violence against children, I think VAO and VAC programming have often operated in kind of parallel silos, and even sometimes been a bit skeptical or critical of one another. You know, I think violence against children, child protection programming can sometimes start to lose the gendered lens, the gendered analysis, and the recognition of the importance of tackling gendered power dynamics. Or that VAO programming can start to lose the age lens and attention to children's voices. Those criticisms can be legitimate in certain instances, and there can be really tricky issues to navigate if you're looking at kind of integrated programming. But I think there are also some genuine opportunities as well to address violence against women and children through a whole family approach, given the kind of deep and clear interlinkages between these issues. And this is certainly one area that we as Raising Voices are really keen to explore further. So I focused on the SASA approach today, and that's perhaps what Raising Voices is best known for, but we are also the creators of the Good Schools Toolkit, which is an evidence-based approach to preventing violence against children in schools. And that's something that we are interested to explore further, is potentially implementing those two models together. So learning what it takes to effectively address violence against women and children simultaneously. What happens if we combine those two models, and what synergies might we identify? And that'll be a big part of our learning agenda over the next few years. So even where programming is not maybe directly integrated in that kind of way, where that may not be feasible or even desirable, I think that practitioners working on violence against women and violence against children still have a great deal to learn from one another. So again, my thanks to Railway Children for recognizing the value of that dialogue and that exchange, and for inviting me to be here today. So I'll also just leave you with some links to some further reading. If anything I've said has piqued your interest and you would like to explore any of this further, there are some articles to learn more about SASA and the SASA study, as well as more around the intersections of violence against women and children, and around COVID-19 adaptations as well. So some resources for further conversation. And I think I'll stop there. So thank you very much for your time, and looking forward to the conversation. Thanks, everyone.
That's great. Thank you so much, Gabriella. Wonderful to hear so much about the SASA initiative and all of that work going on, and a good reminder of the importance of the gender and the age lens in the work that we're doing to prevent violence. Hi, everybody. Sorry for joining late, but I'm glad that I finally made it in and didn't want to miss this webinar. My name's Jo Wakia from Mistral International, and it's a pleasure to be supporting this presentation and webinar today. So now that we've heard from Gabriella and the work of SASA, we are going to come to Kenya and to the Ujamaa Africa work. It's really great to have another example from this region of the work around preventing violence. We're going to hear from Nancy Akoth about the No Means No work to prevent a curriculum that is about preventing sexual abuse and GBV with girls and boys and young adults. Nancy is the program manager at Ujamaa Africa, where she coordinates the implementation of the school-based program, providing comprehensive rape prevention strategies for girls and boys, which is currently being implemented here in Kenya, as well as in Malawi and Somalia. She's previously been part of the Yes I Do Alliance project implementation and technical team, and is a master trainer with a gender transformative approach. So welcome, Nancy. Looking forward to hearing more about this work.
Thank you, Jo Wakia. My name is Nancy Akoth, and I represent Ujamaa in this presentation. So I'm basically going to talk about what we do as Ujamaa, what strategies do we use in school, our areas of operation, plus the evidence that we've gathered in our working experience in schools and also out of schools. So thank you so much. I hope you will enjoy our presentation. In case of any question, don't hesitate to ask. So I'll start by introducing Ujamaa. Who is Ujamaa? Ujamaa is a non-profit organization that works towards prevention of sexual and gender-based violence among vulnerable women and children. And what is our mission and vision as Ujamaa? We seek to empower vulnerable women and children as we envision a society free of violence perpetrated against women and children. And the way we do this is by using the curriculum that we use in school and out of school, which is called Empowerment Transformation Training for both boys and girls. We are currently operating in different areas, starting with Kenya, where we operate in the 5 major slums of Nairobi. That is Mukuru, Korokocho, Dandora, and Huruma. We're also operating in Kajiado County. This was specifically in Kajiado West, but soon we are also stretching to the Central and Kajiado East. We've worked in Turkana County, that is in Kakuma Camp, and also in Garissa County, which is in Dadaab Camp. And currently, we've also rolled out interventions in Migori County and also in Homa Bay County. In Malawi, we operate in 14 districts, and in Somali, we operate in Mogadishu, Galkayo, and Kismayo. what is it about the ETT program? How is it structured? So ETT program, that is the Empowerment Transformation Training Program, is designed for girls and boys from the ages 12 to 20. And I really want to be specific with the ages that we work with in school. That is from ages 10 to around ages 14, that is in primary schools, and ages 14 to 19, that is in secondary school. Then ages 20 to 24, that is the young adults in out of school, but we also engage youth from ages 24 to 35. So our intervention is a dual-pronged program that comprises of the boys and the girls curriculum. The girls curriculum is called the girls self-defense, empowerment self-defense, and the boys curriculum is called the hero in me. So the curriculum takes over 6-week cycle, 5 times per school year, with a number of students ranging from 10,000 to 15,000 per cycle. That is in a whole school cycle, talking about the normal school period in Kenya, which should be around January to December with breaks in between. So our trainers, we have 150 trainers who are highly trained, and most of these trainers come from the community where we implement the project. We believe that when you recruit from their community where you want to work in, these people actually understand what their problem is. And most of them have a background of being gender defenders, or they've served their community at different capacities. So we not only recruit them and bring them in as trainers, but they have to go through different levels of training. The first training that you go through as a trainer is what we call the 3 weeks intensive, which you have to acquire 135 hours of training. And after that training, you have to pass a written test and do physical and teaching exams to qualify as a trainer. And that does not qualify you automatically as a trainer. You have to go teach alongside an experienced trainer, a master trainer, or a TOT for the next 6 months, who is going to guide you through how you are teaching, or how are you explaining the content or delivering the content to the schools. And after that, you go through an evaluation. That is after 1 year. After 1 year now is when you are able to sit for your TOT exams. Then after the TOT exams, we also have a pass rate. Sorry, it's indicated here 30%, but actually it should be 75% for you to go to the next level, which is the level of a global master trainer. What do we teach in the girls program when it comes to the classes? So basically in the girls program, we want to teach girls on how to do boundary settings. This is from them knowing how to set the emotional boundaries, physical boundary, and this will define how people treat them when they are relating with them. We also teach girls on the verbal assertiveness and negotiation. So on verbal assertiveness, we want girls to be able to talk about what they're experiencing. One of the techniques that have been very successful in our training is what we call the naming behavior, where girls talk about what is exactly happening to them, what the perpetrator is touching. If the perpetrator is touching your private part, you don't just shy away from naming it, but you say exactly what the perpetrator is doing. And another verbal assertiveness skill that has been very successful is what we call tell. This is where girls are encouraged to tell what is happening to them until they get that person who will listen to them, for them to get even help, and also to stop what the perpetrator is doing, and also negotiation skills. We also talk about physical self-defense, which in most of the instances we emphasize as the last option. This is the last result. When the girl has tried the physical skills and it has failed, this is the last result she has to do. The program also focuses on hands-on training. In short, this is a skill-based curriculum. So whatever skills that we do, when we're talking about boundary settings, and you want to show this girl, how do you set your emotional boundary, physical boundary, there are certain role plays that we use for these girls to actually know if this person is doing this type of behavior, they're actually infringing my boundary, and this is my physical boundary or even my emotional boundary. So we do most of the role plays plus a few skits for them to understand what skills we are talking about. With the boys program, the main thing that we want to do is to reshape boys' harmful beliefs around gender and sexuality, increase likelihood that boys seek consent for sex. So with consent, it is taught at different level. When it comes to primary, the language is synthesized to maybe, let's say, a very simple term, asking versus taking. So that is when we start introducing consent in primary. So when we get to secondary school, that is a higher level that boys and girls understand what sex is all about. So that is when we bring in the issue of consent and also talk about it in relation to sex. Encouraging boys to intervene on behalf of girls. This program is a dual-pronged program because we want boys to be also part of the solution. When we say they are the problem, they also need to be part of the solution. So we're involving them to be able to stand up for the girls and also speak up for the girls so that we are able to achieve an equal society where boys can be able to defend the rights of the girls, and the girls also can be able to defend the rights of the boys. So I also talked about the ETT out of school program. With this program, we actually did our first piloting in Nairobi, in the 5 slums of Nairobi. Then we did our second piloting in Kajiado County. We identified different target groups through community mobilization and liaising of key community gatekeepers. We mobilized the youth through points such as the community halls, church grounds, and also often sourced them through the chiefs and the community leaders. In Kajiado, to be particular, we focused towards the border riders who are really mentioned in one of our studies, midterm review studies, as the perpetrators of teen pregnancy. So with the borders, we worked closely with them to make them to create a social movement for them to be change agents in the community, where by the end of that project, we used them as they were used as people who will do referrals to the youth-friendly centers for the boys and the girls to even get information about sexual reproductive health at the different youth-friendly centers. So our key research outcomes, so increased self-defense knowledge, skills in girls. The girls who exit our program are mostly prepared to defend themselves verbally and even physically, and reduction also of rape up to 50% in the annual incidences of rape cases, increased reporting and disclosure rates. I talked about TEL, which has been very successful. Most of the girls are able to tell because they already know what exactly, if they keep quiet, what power they are giving to the perpetrator. A reduction of school dropout, cases related to teen pregnancy, FGM, and child marriage. Then the key research outcomes for the boys increased by standard intervention. 75% of the boys reported to have intervened when a woman was being assaulted. Then there was also positive attitude change towards girls and women. Boys who graduated from the program were twice as likely to reject negative gender norms. Impact learning curve and challenges. Our impact has been a holistic approach in dissemination of ETT, both in school and out of school program, which has had positive impact and has really helped us in creating change agents within the community and even the schools. And we are currently doing a program specifically with teachers to be the champions of change in the schools. And we are going through the famous Beacon teachers who are also recognized by the TSC and Ministry of Education. We have been able to form a social movement among the communities through youth and children, training their peers and parents. And this was really noted during the COVID period, where we had youths in the community. Like I said, we used border and even out of school youths to train in the different communities, and even the teachers champion who are trained by then to train in their different community. And also we've been able to salvage at-risk youth, especially during the period when most vulnerable. So this is the period of COVID where we were able to train youth who are at risk of even getting pregnant because of closure of schools due to COVID. So the challenges we've experienced is closure of schools and ban of the gatherings due to COVID that led to increase of vulnerability level, especially among children, owing to closure of schools and tough economic times. And also we had experiences from youths not accessing sexual reproductive health at the health centers. This is because the focus was more on COVID and also the MOH restrictions of attending to few patients in the hospitals. Adaptation, Teacher and Students Champion Program has provided a venue for continuous training and raising of awareness on gender-based violence related incidences. Learning curve. So what have we learned from this program? Allowing community to own this program. This has ensured that even despite the restrictions of COVID, we had our champions teaching down in the ground. And there's need to fast track our sustainability plan, training key community gatekeepers, parents, gender defenders as champion of this transformational training program. This is what we are currently doing, piloting different ways of training this cluster of community change champions, that is the gatekeepers and the parents. Roll out the program that can be easily disseminated online, reaching to the masses following unprecedented times caused by COVID. So this is one thing that we've picked from this COVID-19 period. We also need to create a simple learning material that can be used online to reach out to the girls and boys who cannot be able to attend the trainings at the community level. So I'll leave with you the different publications that we have. And in case you have any questions, do not hesitate to reach us. So these are the number of publications that we've done in the previous years of our implementation. So thank you so much for allowing me to present our work. Thank you so much, Railway Children, for also inviting Jama to this forum.
Great, wonderful. Thank you so much, Nancy. That's a really interesting insight into the work that Jama has been undertaking. Great to hear about the adaptations under COVID when we know this kind of work is so important and we have to find new ways of continuing to support young people with this learning of skills to prevent violence. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Wonderful to see all of the questions coming in. Great to have an engaged audience. Please do keep them coming. Anything that's on your mind that you'd like to ask our speakers. I will be directing a few questions to Gabriella and Nancy as we continue over the next 20 minutes. And I'd like to start actually with a question that I think both Gabriella and Nancy will be able to respond to. A great question about why is it important to address power dynamics when working to end or reduce violence against women and children? And we've heard both speakers mention power and how that plays a role in their work. So let's go to Gabriella and have a response first from you.
Thanks very much, Joe. Thank you, Nancy, for the presentation, and thank you to whoever in the audience it was that asked that question. It's a great question. So, I mean, I think as Raising Voices, we understand kind of, as I was saying, those kinds of gendered power imbalances and relationships as the real root cause of violence against women. And so if we want to prevent violence against women, it's important that we engage with and directly tackle that root cause. And I think that we found that kind of using the language of power has been one of SASA's perhaps key innovations. I think that maybe an experience that many of us on this call have had is sessions that maybe use language around gender and rights can potentially be alienating for some communities, including potentially men who then dismiss the whole thing as a women's issue. And it can be difficult to overcome some of that resistance around gender as a concept. And so I think we found that using the language of power was a little bit more accessible and relatable for everyone in their own lives, because everyone has power and everyone can reflect on how they are using that power positively or negatively in their day-to-day experiences. So while it's still kind of very much grounded in a feminist analysis, I think this language of power was really helpful for us to break through some of that resistance and open up more productive and transformative conversations that really get to the root of the issue and move toward more balanced power relationships, if that helps.
That's great. Thanks, Gabriella. How about you, Nancy? What do you see as the importance of addressing power dynamics in this work?
So in our programming, we found it very important to address power dynamics because this is the major root cause of most of the gender-based violence-related issues. And when you talk about power, you need to look down to who exactly are you giving power to. Like what Gabriella has said, you give someone power and they choose how to use the power. Is it positively or negatively? And that is the same thing that Ujamaa believes in, that the power lies with the girls and the boys and even the youth in the community. So if you have discussion around power, it depends on how you want to bring it out to these target beneficiaries that we have, like the boys and the girls. If you look down at the girls in the schools, they already know that their position in the community is kind of not well spelled out in everything that they do. So telling these girls that whoever wants to sexually assault you, they want to dominate or to make you look like you don't have power over them, is one message that will help them even know that if I empower myself with these skills, then I'm ready to even know exactly what my rights are when it comes to bargaining on the issues relating to women issues or even girls related issues or even my sexual reproductive health issues. The same applies to the boys. The boys also in the society, there's certain gender box they've been put in where they know that we have the power over these girls. So if we continue maintaining our same position, then we are able to subdue them and to make them not feel like they're important in the community. But when we now bring them to the same level, that is the boys and the girls, and know that you can actually have equal power and use this power to your advantage in articulating your rights and what you need, the community that you need to see in future. And that is why I think it is very important to keep on emphasizing the issue of power dynamics in the intervention that we are doing with our boys in schools and girls and out of schools, and also extend these power relations to the caregivers and even the people they relate with outside the community. I think that will help.
Great, thank you, Nancy. Yes, it's interesting to think about how all the power dynamics are mixed up with those gender norms and how important it is to help people think differently about these things. Thank you. We've had another great question. Since we have a lot of people, I think, attending who are working with children who are living and working on the streets, they're wondering how this kind of school-based work can be adapted for children who are outside of households and potentially outside of the formal schooling system. And I know a lot of organizations try to bring education to children who are on the streets. I wonder if this kind of work that you've been doing, if you think it could be adapted for those environments where maybe it's a bit more informal schooling that children are accessing when they're living and working on the streets. What do you think, Gabriella?
So thank you for the question, and of course a very pertinent one for this audience. And of course we know that children outside of school and outside of stable families are among the most vulnerable to violence. So I'm not quite sure if the question is in relation to SASA or the Good Schools Toolkit. So SASA is a community-based approach. So activities can happen anywhere. As I said, in the market, after church, a drama gathering in a community. So I think SASA activities very much aim to kind of meet people where they are, can be informal and ad hoc and hopefully accessible to young people who may not be connected to schools or institutions. The Good Schools Toolkit, and I'll preface all of this by saying that my role as a technical advisor on violence against women is around supporting partners around the world on SASA. So I'm much less of an expert on the Good Schools Toolkit, but is, as the name suggests, a school-based approach. And I think it's very much tied to the school and identifying young people, teachers, administrators who can be champions and agents of change to kind of transform the classroom and school environment, as well as engaging parents. But it is very much a schools-based approach. And I think the journey for raising voices has been first around kind of working at primary school level and building up an evidence base for the Good School Toolkit kind of at primary level, adapting the Good School Toolkit for use at kind of secondary level, and making some modifications for age and strengthening some of the components around gender and healthy relationships for that age group. And then I think maybe now this is a key question for us, is around what about children and young people who are not in school, and how can we better engage and support them? So I think it's a key area of kind of exploration and thinking for us to challenge ourselves around, so that we're kind of leaving no one behind. But I do want to acknowledge that, like, to date, the Good Schools Toolkit has really been focused on use in schools and strengthening the school and community environment.
Great. Yeah, I think it's an interesting area to explore. What about you, Nancy?
I think I already mentioned that we also target the out of school youth. So it's not, our program is not restricted to schools only. So I'll give an example of Nairobi, where we work also with different youth groups and different youth from different places. I think we have one of the organization that also incorporates youths who live in the streets. So it's something that we've tried and tested, and it's actually working. The out of school curriculum has been successful in Kenya. Maybe I don't know the dynamics in Tanzania or Uganda or any other country where the question was asked from. So it's something that we are able to do through doing needs assessment and also a number of focus group discussion to understand the context of where the program needs to be implemented, sorry.
Great, thank you. That's exciting to hear that it's been used that way in Kenya and that there is an out of school approach. Great. I'm sure lots of people will be interested to hear more about that, and hopefully some of the publications and links will lead people to further information. I wonder if we could turn now to the issue of training. It was interesting to hear that both approaches focus on training and mentoring and working closely with those who are rolling out these initiatives. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit more about how important you see that ongoing support to the folk who are delivering your work, and the follow-up with them. And I know someone from our audience has also asked about what the TOT approach in particular for the no means no approach, what that looks like. So maybe let's start with you, Nancy, to tell us a little bit more about your training and mentoring approach.
Okay, so let me start with a question that I can see on the chat. Thank you so much for your question. So as I mentioned, the process of training a trainer will start from the 3 weeks intensive. Then after that, you teach alongside a TOT or an expert trainer for 6 months. After getting feedback from the TOT or the expert trainer, we now go to the next level where you are now trained as a TOT. And as a TOT, you're now able to go and train others, both locally and internationally. So that is what contributes to you being a global master trainer under supervision of maybe someone who was trained as a TOT before you. So that is the steps of getting to the TOT process. And I would also want to say that when you're trained as a TOT, maybe let's say from another organization and you're working with Ujamaa will still have the role of doing supervision on how you are conducting the training. Remember, whatever we are dealing with is very sensitive, and the skills that we are also teaching are very sensitive. So we need very close monitoring of how the skills are being delivered in the schools or even out of school. And the second question, I didn't get the second question clearly. Could you please repeat?
You've already answered it. It was exactly that, the supervision.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. How about you, Gabriella?
Sure. Thank you for the question, and absolutely agree around the critical importance of robust training followed by kind of ongoing mentorship and support kind of throughout the programmatic journey. I think that kind of one-off training at the beginning, one training and then good luck, off you go, is probably like my biggest professional pet peeve. In SASA, there's kind of a really robust training and mentorship structure kind of built in. So there's training at the beginning of each of the 4 phases of SASA, as well as kind of very regular mentoring and support. So monthly or bi-monthly check-ins, activity observation visits, ongoing feedback to community activists and leaders. And I think that kind of investment in mentorship and support for activists is so critical to help them deepen their analysis of some of these core ideas around power and rights and relationships, to help them strengthen their facilitation skills, how they're engaging communities, how they're navigating these really difficult and delicate conversations, to help them strategize about new emerging challenges and how things are going in communities, and also to really kind of establish, sustain, and deepen relationships so that the activists and leaders feel valued and supported to continue their work, which can be challenging and draining, excuse me. And all of that, none of that can be accomplished in a one-off training. So I think that kind of ongoing accompaniment and kind of sustained engagement and support and mentorship is so critical to the success and impact of a model like SASA or Ujaama's work as well.
Great, thank you. Yes, it's really important to remember how sensitive and challenging this topic can be, and having that ongoing support to constantly be improving and thinking things through and adapting is so important. We've had another great question about preventing the intergenerational cycle of violence, which I think is so important, especially for those folk working with children on the streets who we know are there because for a very good reason. They've often taken themselves out of a very unsafe environment. What can be done, do you think, to help boys and girls who have experienced violence to not be the perpetrators when they get to their adulthood? What do your programs do to address that and break that cycle? Let's start with you, Gabriella.
Sure. So the question is kind of how can we help boys who've experienced IPV to not perpetrate that in adulthood? Is that, yeah, okay. So I think that SASA firstly kind of primarily focuses on adults. We do have an adaptation specifically for working with younger age groups, but SASA as a methodology, I think primarily engages adults, though I think its messages are applicable to young people as well. And again, I think it's that language around how you use your power, that you can use your power positively, or encouraging you to reflect on how do you want to use your power in your relationships, in your communities. What kind of person do you want to be in your family, in your community? And I think those questions around use of power are really helpful in supporting young men to reflect on and reconsider the use of violence in relationships. I think SASA also talks a lot about kind of respecting, valuing, caring for your partner. So some of these cornerstones of a healthy relationship, open communication and trust. And I think that those conversations around healthy relationships, how you value your partner, how you show that you value your partner, are also opening up those kinds of conversations, I think are also really important for supporting and encouraging young men to engage in more positive alternative ways of relating to their partners and to one another, to peers and community members as well. So yeah, I think those are some of the conversations that we try to encourage within SASA.
Great, thanks, Gabriella. And Nancy?
So I'll say that Ujamaa has a curriculum that starts addressing issues of violence with boys at a very tender age. That is from the ages of 10 to 14. In Hero in May, we have different categories of age and how information is packaged. So for the primary school boys, it is mostly what we call the sources of strength. And the sources of strength and packages, where do these boys get information? Who do they see as their role model in the society? And why do they see these people as their role model? So through this explanation, you'll get to know what exactly and how do they perceive these people they see as their role model. I'll give one of examples, like a boy will say their father is their role model. If you ask them why at the beginning of the class, they will tell you their father is that person who can beat a woman thoroughly. So from that point, you actually start seeing this boy actually associates with person who can beat a woman as a role model. So how do you start changing that perception to make sure that this boy does not turn out to be like the dad? So it's a journey that it's demonstrated through different intervention skills that these boys are given at that age. And later on, they graduate to the secondary level where they have now the curriculum called Heroing Me. This curriculum tries to now reshape their beliefs around the gender norms, and also try to also give them to know what consent is all about and what violence is all about. And if you're talking about rape as a man, what rape does to women, and the rapist, what do they have? What like how does the mind of a rapist look like, and how does the mind of a man who wants to violate a woman looks like? So the fact that we also bring the boys and the girls at some point together also help in evaluating and unpacking what the boys think about the girls and the girls think about the boys. So this will really give you that, it will give you an idea of who the boys are turning out to be. Are they turning out to be like their fathers, or they're going to change and be different from their fathers?
Great, thank you, Nancy. That's a really great explanation. So thank you so much to everybody who's been participating today. Thank you, Gabriella. Thank you, Nancy, for sharing so much about your work. It's been really fascinating. As an M&E specialist, I'm particularly pleased to see how evidence-based both of these pieces of work are. It's great that we're really building that evidence and demonstrating what works. And it's clear that both the work of Raising Voices and of Ujamaa is really making a difference in so many people's lives, and addressing some of these key factors that drive separation of children from their families. It's been fun to hear about addressing those power dynamics and thinking about it across ages and across genders, and clear that both pieces of work really involve so many different actors, including the children themselves, to address these issues and provide that ongoing level of support to ensure that these changes that you've evidenced can be sustained. So thank you for sharing all of that, and I hope everybody has enjoyed hearing this, and we look forward to continuing this conversation through the conference with Railway Children, and as everybody continues to interact in our sector dealing with these issues. So thank you very much to everybody.